Now I want to dive into the business side of this equation, because understanding the economics from a manufacturer's perspective helps explain why change has been so slow and where the real barriers and opportunities lie. When food companies evaluate whether to reformulate products to remove artificial colors, they're looking at a complex cost-benefit analysis that goes beyond simple ingredient costs. The reformulation process itself represents a significant investment. Product developers need to experiment with natural colorant alternatives, which, as we discussed earlier, behave differently than synthetic dyes. This means extensive testing to achieve acceptable color, shelf life, and taste. Each reformulation iteration requires lab work, stability testing, sensory panels, and potentially pilot production runs. For a major manufacturer with dozens or hundreds of products, this adds up to millions of dollars in R&D costs. Then there's the ingredient cost differential. Natural colorants cost significantly more than synthetic dyes, anywhere from 2 to 20 times more expensive depending on the specific colors needed. For products manufactured at huge scale where margins are already thin, even a penny or two per unit in increased ingredient costs can mean millions of dollars in reduced profitability annually. Marketing and communications represent another cost category. When a company reformulates, they need to manage the transition carefully to avoid consumer rejection of products that look different. This typically involves consumer research, packaging updates, advertising campaigns explaining the changes, and sometimes promotional offers to encourage trial of the reformulated products. These costs can rival or exceed the reformulation costs themselves for major brands. On the flip side, there are potential benefits that forward-thinking companies are capturing. The clean label trend is real and growing. Consumers increasingly seek products without artificial ingredients, and they're willing to pay premium prices for them. Companies that reformulate successfully can position products as healthier, more natural, and more transparent, potentially commanding higher prices or gaining market share from competitors who haven't reformulated. Case studies from companies that have gone through this process show that it's economically feasible when done strategically. Companies that have succeeded typically followed several best practices. They started with their highest value products where consumers are less price sensitive. They invested in consumer education before and during the transition. They made the change gradually across their portfolio rather than attempting everything at once. They used the reformulation as a marketing opportunity, promoting the cleaner labels prominently. And they were willing to accept products that looked slightly different, trusting that taste and quality would win consumer acceptance. Sales performance data post-relaunch varies, but is often positive. Some products experience initial sales dips as consumers react to the different appearance, but sales typically recover within 6 to 12 months as the new version becomes normalized. Some products actually see sales increases, particularly in categories where health-conscious consumers are actively seeking better options. Price implications depend on market positioning. Premium brands often absorb the increased costs or use them as justification for price increases that consumers accept. Value brands face tougher decisions because their customers are highly price-sensitive. This is part of why we see a two-tier system emerging where expensive products get reformulated while cheap products retain artificial colors. Industry R&D experts I've spoken with emphasize that the technical challenges are solvable. The color stability and performance issues with natural colorants that were significant obstacles 10 years ago have largely been addressed through better understanding of how to formulate with these ingredients. The barrier is no longer, can we do it, but will we do it? Cost modeling scenarios show that at scale, the economics work, especially when you factor in risk mitigation. Companies that reformulate avoid potential regulatory costs if restrictions are eventually imposed, reduce litigation risk from consumer lawsuits, and insulate themselves from reputation damage if public opinion turns more strongly against artificial additives. These risk-adjusted analyses often favor proactive reformulation even when the simple ingredient cost comparison doesn't. The economic reality is that reformulating without dyes is feasible for companies willing to invest in it. The costs are manageable, especially for large manufacturers with resources and scale. The market is increasingly rewarding companies that make these changes. What's needed is leadership willing to prioritize long-term brand value and consumer health over short-term cost minimization.